All right, we're gonna get started here. I think we all know how important travel is, not only for us for like recreation and vacation, but also for clinical trials and clinical appointments and just care, especially for people with a disability like FA. And so I've invited some experts on travel with me who have experience with travel and all the issues surrounding it. And so we want to learn a little bit. Our goal is to leave about 10-15 minutes at the end of this panel for question and answer from the audience. So keep that in mind as we go through and address some of the things. I'm gonna have a disclaimer right now. I lost my voice yesterday because everyone came out and we had an incredible day at Ataxia. So thank you for that right off the bat. So for our travel panel, I'm gonna hand it over. We're gonna go down and do self-introductions real quick, and then we're going to jump into some of the issues and stories. So, Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to. My name is Sean. I have Friedreich's ataxia. I was diagnosed in 2007. I'm 43. So right this minute, Kyle and I are the exact same age. I live in Sacramento, California. I work full-time for a grocery company. And on the side, I do a lot of side hustles such as podcasting and patient advocacy and whatever I can do to just advance life, I suppose.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Megan.
I'm Megan Leeper. I was diagnosed in 2017. 7 years ago. I'm 26, and my family and I recently got a wheelchair accessible RV, and we've been kind of traveling around to different parts of the US with it, and it's been really fun to go and visit the several parts and places that we've been to.
All right.
Hello, I'm Terry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm Terry Neer. I'm Director of Client Services for Block Clinical, and we're a service provider for clinical trials. And we work with the participants and the sites for payments, as well as logistics for including hotels, transportation, ground transfers, and flights as well.
All right. Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler Anderson Leonard. I am the manager of our product innovation group at Delta Flight Products, where we have been working on developing an entire suite of accessible products for the aircraft, such as the seat that you see back there with our team.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. And we're going to jump into a little more of the stories in the panel. So thank you for that brief introduction, Daniel.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Daniel Van Sant. I am the Director of Disability Policy at the Harkin Institute at Drake University, based in Des Moines, Iowa. We work primarily in the area of disability employment, working with companies, universities, agencies, but of course, without access to transportation, you are not working very many places. So we've started to work in transportation policy as well. I have a physical disability that I was born with, but not FA. I'm also on the Disability Advisory Committee for Cruise, which is the autonomous vehicle subsidiary of General Motors. So excited to be part of this conversation.
Awesome. So first of all, I want to start at the end. I know that, not physically at the end, like at the end of the concept. So I want to start with Sean and Megan. Sean, what is one of the travel experiences or places you visited that really sticks out to you?
Most recently,
Sure.
I went to this random road in India, and that one sticks out to me because, it's a long trip, but I also hurt myself. So the trip home was even longer. So I think the question was, what is the most significant? And I would have to put that up on top of the
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, what would you like to tell everyone kind of about that experience?
Maybe don't do it. There's nothing I don't know. I think life is worth living at that level of risk.
Yeah.
So I think we're crazy, but I also think that's the way life is meant to be lived. So, do your part in planning and take precautions, but maybe don't let things stop you from at least trying.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And Megan, you talked a little bit about this accessible RV. And you mentioned a couple of that you've been different places. What are those places and why are they important to you?
Well, one of my bucket list items is to go to all the national parks. And before we acquired the RV, my parents and I went up all the way to the Badlands and is it Nebraska?
South Dakota.
Okay, South Dakota. Thank you.
Same thing.
We went to the Badlands and I wanted to stay there more. It was just really nice and peaceful over there, and it wasn't just a desert. There was nice flora, if you want to be scientific, over there, and some nice animals to look at. We saw a lot of animals on that trip. That was, I don't know.
So Megan, why is travel important to you?
I've always wanted to travel. I've always liked traveling. And then whenever I was diagnosed, I really wanted to still be able to travel. And there were just a whole lot of barriers that I didn't realize that there would be, mainly because I just haven't thought of it. And so I still want to be able to travel to places and not have to worry about if a hotel is going to be accessible, if they're going to, if this restaurant, I can get into the restaurant, if I can get into places and enjoy places and entertainment and everything where
Yeah.
I go. So I feel that travel is very important in that aspect.
Well, I love that you took it into your own hands and your family figured out a way to make it happen even with all its challenges. So lovely. So I want to jump into travel for clinical care and clinical trials. And Sean, I know that you've traveled, we've talked about it on the podcast, and you've traveled for clinical trials and clinical care. Can you give everyone just maybe an overview of how that works for you and where you usually go for your care?
Yeah, my clinical site is UCLA, Dr. Susan Perlman. That's typically where most of mine are. I've done a couple elsewhere, but for me, that's an hour and a half flight to maybe a 7-hour drive. I'm not a fan of driving. We talked fatigue earlier. Their car puts me to sleep, and I have a feeling if you're driving and you fall asleep, that's a bad position to be in. So I fly, and generally speaking, it's fairly smooth, but also I realize that I'm a little more ambulatory and have a little more strength than many people do. So I know it's easier for me than it is most. And some of the arrangements that get taken care of just help make that a little bit more manageable.
Oh,
I already forgot the question.
that's okay. I think you answered it really well. And Megan, we talked about in our preparation that you guys have figured out clinical sites and doctors to visit within driving distance. Is that true?
I am very fortunate that I live about an hour and some change from UT Southwest. So that's where I go for all the doctor's appointments.
Beautiful.
I did have a clinical trial at Long Beach, California, but that was at the beginning of 2020.
What
And
happened then? I don't know. What do you mean?
everyone knows what happened. So that was just kind of crazy. So I both flew there and drove there, and it does take longer to get from Dallas to El Paso than El Paso to Los Angeles, by the way, in case if anybody is wondering if that was true. It is true.
Okay, appreciate that. All right. Thank you so much, Megan. Terry, we've heard a little bit of the experiences and where people go, and we know that it can be a challenge. Travel can be a challenge. And so how does Block Clinical support travel for clinical trials?
So what we do is we work directly with the participants, with their caregivers, with their family, whoever's going to be traveling with them to find out what their specific needs are. We're usually hired by the pharmaceutical company or the CRO to be able to support it. And so we have our coordinators work directly with them, talking to the people that are going to be traveling, find out what the specific needs are, and then we book that travel for them and prepay for it. So for your airline tickets, find out what kind of needs you have, what kind of devices you travel with, what kind of, make sure that we have the appropriate seats if you need aisle chairs, with transfers, what's needed, what kind of support's needed with that. And make sure we cover all those arrangements, and then we find flights for you. Also, how long you want your flights to last. Do you want a direct flight? Do you need a break every couple of hours? How long do you need for a layover? All those kinds of details. And then we also work with you on your hotel accommodations, specifically what kind of room you need, what kind of bathroom you need, the width of the doors, the height of the bed, those kinds of arrangements. And we try to get as many things because it's not just a one size fits all. Obviously, it's everybody's needs are different. And that is one thing that we've really found out about the FA participants is that it's very personal and advocating for yourself and letting us know what you need. Then we also do ground transportation as well. So these services are all prepaid. And so we find out the right kind of vehicle, how you can transfer what works best with your device that you're traveling with, if it's a chair, if it folds up, what you can ride in, what you can't ride in. And then we schedule all those things. We also do reimbursements. And the thing that's a little different about Block is that it's a direct deposit. Instead of just getting a reloadable debit card, we actually put the money back into your account so you can use it as you need to. And we can add as many people, like a participant can receive the funds or for reimbursements, or one of your other family members could get the stipend payments, or we can add as many different people need to be paid as possible as you need us to. And then that's how we, support. And we also work with the sites to coordinate the visits. And then we try to provide some emotional support too, especially for some of the longer trips, and then just find out what's available in those areas too for you.
And I wanted to let everyone know this, and I hope I don't embarrass you here, but Terry let us know that she is unwilling to let go of any of her FA accounts. She loves working with our community. So Terry, you're our person. Thank you.
It's true. So I'm very attached.
Daniel,
as some of them do know.
Daniel, we just heard Terry talk about, all the reimbursement through clinical trials, and that makes sense because there's a sponsor, but travel is really expensive, and you have to travel for clinical care a lot of times, especially in this community when we don't have very many people. We don't have sites right next door a lot of times. And so what are some of the things that we should think about, maybe like with Medicaid or other mechanisms for paying for travel, specifically for clinical visits?
Sure. So I think there's really a spectrum of options out there. I feel like this is kind of one of those, if you ever watch those YouTube videos about how to like maximize your credit card points or sort of like game the system, there's a lot of tools out there that I feel like people don't know across sort of the economic spectrum. So for anyone who's on Medicaid, for example, federal Medicaid regulations require that every state Medicaid agency have coverage of what they call non-emergency medical transport. So this isn't like you taking an ambulance or something like that, but going to a needed clinical appointment, a doctor's visit, something like that. So I know we have people from various states. If you're on Medicaid, your state has a policy for what is covered under non-emergency medical, NEMT, non-emergency medical transport, because we love our acronyms. And so there could be options in your state to have mileage reimbursed if you drive yourself or have a family member or someone drive you, or to pay for part of a hotel stay if you're required to stay overnight. You'll want to check whatever the policy is in your state for how far away that needs to be, or how much they'll pay per mile or per hotel night. But a lot of people don't even know that that's a possibility. For people who are not on Medicaid, there's a few other mechanisms that I want to highlight. So FSA accounts, or flexible spending accounts, are something that you can get through your employer. For example, I have one through our university. And so that is a pre-tax mechanism where I put a piece of my paycheck into this flexible spending account to use for medical purposes. And so, for example, where I live in Iowa, I am probably 2.5 hours away from an orthopedist that specializes in what I need them to do. And so I can actually take that visit, and then when I come back, submit a reimbursement to my FSA for mileage. And if the appointment was at a certain time of day, I'll stay overnight, either on the way there or back. And I get part of the hotel, but not the whole hotel, reimbursed. So if you have an FSA through your employer, that's also something to check out. And that can be typically for you, or if you have a dependent, maybe you're a parent of someone who's traveling, so you can look into that. HSAs, or health savings accounts. Like I said, we have a lot of tips today. HSAs are another acronym here, is not employer required. So you could open up an HSA yourself as an employed individual and just put money in there similar to an FSA and use that to pay for this type of health expenditure. And then the last one I want to highlight are ABLE accounts. So I don't know how many people in here have heard of or maybe have ABLE accounts, but these are specific saving mechanisms for people with disabilities that importantly the first $100,000 in your ABLE account does not count toward your assets for SSI. So it's just a completely set aside saving mechanism, but you don't have to be on Medicaid or receiving benefits to have an ABLE account. A lot of people in this room qualify for ABLE accounts and maybe don't even know it. But ABLE accounts are very, very flexible in what you can use them for. And so you, family members, friends, whoever can contribute money to your ABLE account and it grows tax-free. And you can use it for anything that improves your quality of life as a person with a disability. And so that includes not only travel for medical treatment, but like that trip to the Badlands could have been paid for out of an ABLE account. Like your vacations, your fun travel could also come from an ABLE account that is growing tax-free. So there's a lot of these mechanisms for different people to explore to help at least cover something, right? $50 of a hotel room is $50 that you can spend on something else. So look into these systems of what you might qualify for and make sure you're taking advantage of everything that you can.
Wonderful. Oh, that's very useful. Thank you, Daniel. So I want to delve in a little bit specifically on plane travel. And Sean, first of all, I wanted to ask you what your worst and what your best experience is traveling by plane.
Like, do you want airlines or not necessarily?
No, we don't want to disclose
Okay.
any names here.
All right.
No. Whatever you want.
The best was flying to a FARA event, I believe Energy Ball, but don't quote me. Years ago, it never flew this airline, was in line. This was before the walker, before the wheelchair. And this airline, you kind of, I think I was late, so I was in line to get on the plane. And there was a security agent that worked for that airline that saw me in line and thought I was inebriated. And this is the best experience. Honestly, this is a good story. So the gentleman came over to me and just quietly and politely asked, "Sir, can I pull you out of line, just speak to you for a minute?" So I kind of figured what was coming. So I said, "Sure." So we stepped over a few feet and he was like, "Hey, I just, we get the impression that maybe you're not sober." I forget exactly what he said. Those words are probably illegal, but he said something expressing concern, and I explained, "I have a condition, blah, blah, blah." And he was like, "I understand. Thanks for sharing that with me. Sorry to slow you down. Let's get you on the plane." And I had, I think, 4 flights, a connection on the way here and a connection on the way back. And he said, "I will make sure the flight crew knows." And I didn't think much of it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But he literally made sure the flight crew knew. And a note was placed on every flight on that particular trip, so that when I checked in on the return, there was no issue. Like, there was no concern. And I just thought that was impressive, because it's not too often the airlines go out of your way or go out of their way for a passenger, unless you're some elite gold, platinum plus diamond person, which I'm not. So I was just impressed with the way it was handled and the trickle down effect.
Yes.
The worst was probably a more recent trip. Flying when you're damaged is just not fun. And twofold, other countries don't really have the standards that we have, and that could be good or bad. So flying in another country was rough when I was banged up. But back in the States, I had to use the aisle chair. I couldn't walk and I couldn't really furniture walk. And guys would kind of, push me into a seat. And that was great. Because I had flight credits, so I used that to upgrade to first class. So for a minute, I was double platinum, diamond, whatever. So for one flight. Anyway, the hoisting, I chose a window, and that was probably foolish. But on first class, you have that big armrest tray thing right in between you. So they set me in the first seat, and then we had to hoist over that armrest into the next seat. And it was, this side that was beat up, and they picked me up, but didn't pick me up high enough and swung me right into that hard plastic. I may as well be metal with spikes, armrest. And it's one thing to bang your arm or your head for a minute, but that pain lingered the most of the flight. Like, it was just hard to get comfortable again. And probably also because at that point I didn't really have a lot of good pain meds.
All right.
That's
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sean, for reliving that for a moment. I think a lot of people here can probably relate, maybe not to that extreme, but I think there's probably a lot of experiences.
I'll add, I think the overall point of the story was having the bad experiences usually involve people that really aren't trained well or don't really know how to handle you or your device.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. So, Daniel, considering some of these experiences, we talked about the ADA a little bit and some of the different protections that it provides. And can you tell us a little bit about that, considering plane travel and what we should think about with some of the protections provided by the ADA and others?
Sure. So let me get closer to my microphone. Yeah, I think one important thing that I would want to emphasize is just how complicated the legal system around air travel is, because we really struggle to make laws that are simple and straightforward in our country. And so the Americans with Disabilities Act, right, covers for all forms of public life. So your employment, your sort of public accommodations, like your public spaces. And so in regards to air travel specifically, the ADA, if you think of the ADA's sort of jurisdiction, it's like everything involved with air travel until you get to the airplane or the airplane services. So the ADA covers hotels, public transportation, like your ride shares, your taxis, sidewalks. It covers the airport and the terminal, but a different legal framework covers the airplane and the airline companies. So your ticket sales, all of that are the Air Carrier Access Act. So I think, one, it's just important to know that those are two different laws with their own sets of regulations, because, right, if you're not informed about these things, it's a little bit harder to protect your rights or argue for your rights. So know that those are different. The accessibility regs are often a little bit similar. The Air Carrier Access Act will sometimes pull from the ADA, but now we're getting a little bit deep into the weeds here.
Yeah.
So just know that the same accessibility standards that you're maybe used to with hotels, restaurants, parks, other public spaces are not the same for the airline itself, which is why, right, a lot of airplane bathrooms, right, are not like the big accessible bathrooms, because those are two different regulatory guidelines. And I know Tyler can certainly talk more to that piece there. So just know that those are two separate pieces.
I want to jump to Tyler, but I wanted to, a lot of us know a thing or two about the ADA. I didn't know anything about the Air Carrier Access Act. And so what's one thing you can tell us that's important about the Air Carrier Access Act that we should know, or that's interesting, whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully it's interesting that it exists. If that's new information, you now have one more thing to be empowered with. Something that I think is good for people to know is that if you are traveling with a medical device, maybe you have a CPAP or a dialysis machine with you, or your cane, your folding wheelchair. If you're traveling with medical equipment or device, that does not count toward your baggage limitation. So let's say you can check a bag, right? And then on the carry-on, you can typically have a personal item and a carry-on piece of luggage. So you can still have that carry-on suitcase, your personal item, and your CPAP in a bag, and that CPAP does not put you over your baggage allotment. So just know that that's an option. Now, that medical baggage does have to be medical equipment. You can't just put like an inhaler in a duffel bag and say, this is my accessible, like you can't quite game the system, but you don't have to take up space in your carry-on bag with a CPAP or other medical device. You can carry it on separately, and it doesn't count toward your baggage limitation.
Great, thank you. Tyler, we have this awesome booth back here and demonstrating an incredible thing that we're going to be able to get on the plane and be a little more accessible. Can you talk about the different products that you guys are developing at Delta Flight Products?
Certainly. So the wheelchair accessible seat is the example of the very first real accessibility product that we took on in our group. We've kept the entire accessible product suite within the innovation group because it really fosters a lot of new invention and a lot of creativity that you typically don't get with a regular design process. So we started out with the seat. It was a concept that was designed by a consortium out of the UK, one of which is the founder of Flying Disabled, who you may be well aware of, Chris Woods, who has 2 adult children who have loved to travel their entire lives. And so he's always faced those challenges. And the consortium came to us at Delta Flight Products and said, okay, we have an idea, but how do we design this and get it on an aircraft? And so we've become part of that partnership in order to develop the seat. We started out with a business class version of the seat because the lack of aisle width on the aircraft requires us to have that in a front row position in order to be accessible by a wheelchair. However, what we have done with both the business class version and now the economy version, is really worked a lot with all of those guidances that Daniel was mentioning. If you can imagine where he talks about ADA and ACA, and we have not only them, but we have FAA and the FAA Reauthorization Act, and we have all of the different safety critical things that we have to be able to comply with to put any product on an aircraft, but when working with accessible product, especially so. So we've gotten a long way with it. We've really partnered with the FAA and the Department of Transportation early on in the process for the seat. And right now we have submitted 2 cases that are called TSOs with the FAA for both the economy and the business version of the seats. And we're going into testing for it so that we can prove that it's safety and it meets all of the requirements, and we can start working towards installing it on an aircraft. So more to come and soon to come. But then using the innovation processes, what that also did for us was started showing us where the constraints and the gaps were. So Ron Said, who's back there demoing the seat for you, came up with the concept for a cargo tray that is more protective of wheelchairs, so that if in the event you do have to have a wheelchair placed into the cargo hold, number one, it increases the number of aircraft that the wheelchairs will fit in. But number 2, utilizing some really standard practices in shipping and freight industry, has basically 3 pockets of air that envelop the wheelchair to prevent it not only from environmental damage, but most importantly from mechanical damage. So it can be inflated around the wheelchair in order to keep it customized to the shape, the size, and such of that particular chair. That makes it safe for it to be upright or put on its side. And it also secures it to the floor of the cargo so that it isn't being moved around or sliding around during transport. But then we started thinking about the issues that we have with the onboard wheelchair. So onboard wheelchair or aisle chair that you're familiar with, we have heard the problems that are associated with using that. And so we've moved on now to looking at a better design for an onboard wheelchair that will prevent it from banging into seats, that will make it much more, make it much easier to be able to guide it through the aisleway, make it much more padded. So the FAA Reauthorization Act came out and required changes to the onboard wheelchair. We've also been told by Department of Transportation that our wheelchair accessible seat is something that's going to be looked at in the near future. And there was also Reauthorization Act for onboard lavatories and accessibility. I want to stake our claim right now that every single one of these was passed long after we began designing what we're designing today. So, we're not being made to do it.
So, Tyler, I'm going to press you a little bit here. You use the word soon, and there was one other. Anyway, what does soon mean?
So I am not at liberty to share any dates, but what I can tell you is that we've heard people within the industry talk about, oh, that's going to take 10 years, it's going to take 5 years, it's going to take 3 years. I'm telling you, it's not going to take that long.
Awesome. Thank you. So one last question. You know, there's been a lot of advocacy in the past few years for plane travel specifically, and you know, seeing that be effective from your standpoint, what's the message that you want to give to this room? What can we do to support that effort and maybe to support you as well as you guys develop these things?
I love that question. Thank you. We have at Delta Airlines, they have an advisory council that's been in existence for 15 years. It's the longest standing airline advisory council, covers a wide array of disabilities. However, I also mentioned to you Chris Woods with Flying Disabled. We partner with many different groups and associations. Of course, our partnership with Biogen. And what that has allowed us to do is have access to the user community. In aviation, engineering groups know how to design, develop, qualify, certify, install products on aircraft. And the airlines are really, really good at being able to operationalize them and sustain them. What we don't know is how that product is going to serve you. So we really try very hard to make it a part of not only our formal process, but just by presence at events such as this, to continually reach out and ask people, what do you need? What are your experiences? We show the product that we have today and we say, please come try it out, use it, see what you think of it, and give us feedback, because we iterate the design based on that feedback to make sure that when the product is installed and ready to be used, it's going to meet your expectations.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tyler. I want to move on to something that we're all familiar with, ground travel and hotel. We've all had experiences, and Megan, in a previous conversation and a little bit here today, you mentioned issues with booking hotels. Can you tell us a little about that?
My dad, he would spend hours just scrolling through hotel websites to see if it was accessible or not. And whenever he would see that there was a roll-in shower he would lean more towards having that and getting that hotel room reservation. But I was talking to my parents last night about this, and I was reminded one time, I think it was when we flew to the clinical trial. We reserved a room that was accessible. And when we got there, the hotel staff was like, "Oh, that room is not available." So there were words uttered, and we quickly went to the hotel across the street, and they had an accessible room, thankfully. And I was reminded of that last night, and I know of another experience. I thought it was at Yellowstone, but I was mistaken. I forgot where. The only thing that the hotel had to make it like an accessible room, it was just a single grab bar in the bathroom, and that was it. And we were like, that doesn't work. And we always try to tell the staff, like, this room is not accessible. So with the RV, it takes a lot of stress off because we know exactly where we're going to sleep if we know it's accessible. And we know the bathroom situation and it's all accessible and everything. It just takes a lot of stress off for all of us, that we're able to travel around more with the.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Megan, these are common experiences. I think we've probably, anyone who's booked a hotel that needs a roll-in shower, it's probably experienced some time when it's not ready, or it's not available once you get there. And how infuriating is that, right? And so, Sean, I wanted to ask you, what do you do when you get there and it's not what you expected or what you need?
I'd utter probably the same words. You know, you've got to advocate for yourself. It's not easy to just make another room work. It's one thing to go from a really nice suite to a standard room. Okay, make it work. But when it's accessibility, you need those grab bars. You need a little bit of a wider door. If you can't get on the bed or off the bed in the morning, like, it interrupts everything you're traveling for, like the whole thing. So I've only had a few of those instances. The most maddening was the front desk, agent got a manager, because it was a huge hotel, a huge Vegas, like they're all big, and there wasn't one accessible room. I didn't believe it. And the guy said, well, I had said, I made the reservation, I called. I feel like I did my part to make sure the room was going to work for me. And he said, well, we're not required to guarantee the room. And I just thought to myself, that's the dumbest response you could give a person in my situation right now. Which room? We should have some regulations for that. Can you help with that? No. It's the biggest thing is advocating and pressing for what you need. And ultimately, if they're unwilling to find a way to make it work, take your business elsewhere, which isn't always easy, to get into especially if you're Ubering. You've gotten dropped off, all your luggage, your chair, everything.
Mm.
Just find out you can't stay there. Now you've got to call another Uber. You've got to it's just,
Yeah.
we all know.
Yeah. All right. So not a simple answer, but really, I mean, it does help to talk about it and realize that everyone has those experiences. Like, you're not alone when you do that. And sometimes it's like just making it happen in the moment. And yeah, like you said, advocating for yourself. So, yep. Thank you for that. Daniel, I do want to go to you partly because Sean looked down and what are the protections that are in place for ground transportation and specifically for hotels?
Sure. So, excuse me. Yeah, I would say that the Americans with Disabilities Act does cover any public spaces. So if there's something like your public transportation that's run by the city or state or national government, but also private entities that provide services to the public. So hotel chains, ride shares, private taxi companies, all of these things are covered by the ADA and required to have accessible rooms, accessible features, accessible websites, what have you. I think part of what Sean is maybe talking about is there's a certain number of accessible rooms in a hotel, and if they get booked up, you just kind of get this, well, we're sorry, we're out of these rooms, or we've given it to somebody else, right? A big conference is in town and booked up all the rooms, right? I'm going to guess there's probably not a lot of accessible rooms left in this vicinity because of all of us today, which is great. But also, if you're not part of this conference and you need that room, you're going to get that sort of, sorry, our rooms are booked up. That's off on a tangent here. But I think my sort of tip or piece of advice is, I think, unfortunately, right now, spontaneous travel is difficult for the disability community. Right. We all know that just because these laws and regulations are in place doesn't mean that they're always being followed or that every place you go is following them the same way. I think of, I was in a very small town in rural Iowa, and a new hotel had just been built. I was going to stay there. I don't always need an accessible room, so I try not to take it if I don't feel like I need one. But they put me on the second floor, and I had all this luggage, and there was no elevator. And so I can get up a certain number of stairs typically, but if I'm carrying all my luggage, no. And so then I was in that moment of like, how could you, like, this was just built within the last 5 years, and you have multiple, oh, well, our accessible rooms are on the first floor. Okay, fine. But like, there's also that third space of, I don't want to take your accessible room, but I also need to be able to get to the others. And again, the next closest hotel might be 30, 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can hop on
Right.
public. So I think the sort of pro tip is, I think, unfortunately, we do really have to try to plan ahead. And I would advocate trying to do as much of this booking in writing as possible, because it's a lot easier to take a screenshot of your emails back and forth with a hotel or rideshare company or what have you, where they're saying, we don't have this type of room or we don't offer that. And that doesn't solve your problem in that moment. But then you can take those sort of things and file complaints, go to the Civil Rights Commission in your state, go to the Department of Justice and show, here's a hotel that was just built that is telling me they don't have accessible rooms. Or here is me trying to book an accessible ride share and being told we don't take service animals or wheelchairs. Again, I know that's not helpful in the moment when you're turned away, but trying to book things ahead of time, saving those chats and things when things go poorly, at least gives you a mechanism for us to kind of move this forward.
Yeah.
I think we do a lot of consulting for businesses at the Harkin Institute, and sometimes you get those businesses that say, well, we just don't have any disabled people coming here, so why would I need more rooms that are accessible, because we don't get that many disabled clients at our hotel. And I have to kind of really lay it out and say, do you think maybe you're not getting disabled customers because you don't have rooms that we can stay in. And it's just like, you see the little dim light bulb go on of like, oh, well, we don't have to put a ramp in front of our sandwich shop because we don't have any customers in wheelchairs. And it's like, you're so close. You're so close. But so I think having this record of, like, I hate to tell disabled people that we have to be the squeaky wheels trying to be greased. But if companies are getting inundated with constant emails and calls and things about accessible rooms, accessible taxis, accessible seats on Amtrak or on a flight, it shows that we are a customer base that would be contributing to you financially if you allowed us the opportunity, which just kind of helps move us all forward. So it's I don't know that that's a direct answer, but right, we have these things in place. It's about enforcing them and showing that we are here. We do want to travel. We want to be places. And the company that puts in an accessible seat on their airplane is going to get our business.
Yep.
So show that our business is valuable.
No, it's a great response for thing. There is no direct answer, right? It's all of us putting our effort forward. So thank you for that. All right, so we're coming towards the end of our time. I did not prepare this panel for this question, but think about, I'm gonna go to Terry for a second, but before I do that, I want you to think about what's, in 1 or 2 sentences, what's your number one piece of advice for this room for accessible travel or booking? Or so think about that. But Terry, I have a question here for you. What are your best practices specifically for booking ground transportation and hotel?
Yeah. So when you were talking about hotel, just to add on to that, I don't want to take too much time from it, but you know, a lot of times with hotels, it depends on what year it was built, because there are certain regulations that if it was built before like 2012 or 2018, there are some different laws that apply to those specific properties. So what I have found with booking hotels is that some of the larger chains do have better regulations, and they don't necessarily follow like the law requires 1 of 75 rooms to be accessible. So that gets really, I mean, but there are a lot of hotel chains like Marriott and Hilton. They do have more rooms available. I think one of the things that's really difficult is to not necessarily use some of the third-party booking agents, which sometimes you can be guaranteed a room because of that, but also it says accessible. If you don't look carefully, it could be hearing accessible, because you'll find there are a lot of hearing accessible rooms and then you'll maybe see a picture and there's a grab bar, and you know that's the one grab bar that they have, or they're showing a shower that maybe has a grab bar or a vertical grab bar and a horizontal grab bar, and that's it. But it's saying it's an accessible room and it's really not. So you really have to, you know, I find it's better to go to the website of the hotel. Like you might still go back and book it there on, you know, because you'll get a better deal or you get points or whatever. But to go look at the hotel and see what's really available, I do think that's really important. Also, you know, and I have worked for a Hilton before, and I'm not pushing them because sometimes I think they need to renovate a little sooner. But one of the things about Hilton is that when you do go on one of their websites, they do a message will pop up if you're trying to book an accessible room. It will ask you, do you really need this accessible room? Because they reserve it for people with disabilities that need this room. So I think that's a really nice piece of it. With Marriott, if you're booking on their website, one of the things is you can't select the room yet, or, you know, the accessibility for that room. You pick your room type first, and then it'll show you like what, you know, then you can drop down after you pick your room type. Say you want a 2-queen bedroom. It'll show you what is available to you for accessibility. And then it'll tell you if it's guaranteed or if it's not guaranteed. And that is something I found with Marriott's really consistent about making sure that you get that room type. And I do a lot of calls to the hotel Especially if it's hotels that we use a lot, just to, I've had them go and measure doorways. We've had some really great experiences with hotels, and we've had some really nightmare ones, where, you just can't even believe that. Well, you probably can, but it's insane what happens and what the responses are.
Yeah.
For ground transportation, we do work with a national company, and they, we can do all types of vehicles. One of the things that we had talked about the other day was even just like if you can transfer, that's important to know what you can transfer into. Because a lot of times you may order an SUV because you have a bigger wheelchair, but you're like, I don't need a Wave. I can use an SUV. But one of the things a lot of times is they're the really high ones. They're the big luxury kind, and you have to take or need to step on a stool to get into it, and that's not an option, or may not be an option. So it's something that you need a lower one, like a minivan or something along those lines. And I think that's really important to know and to be aware of what, that there are all types of things that are offered, but to just be cautious of that. With the ride shares, they've gone a long way in improving what's available. And like Uber has, it's Uber Wave. And that's, it's not available in every city, but there are a lot of cities that it is available, and it is a growing market. And everybody has to be certified and trained. Same thing with Lyft. It was Lyft Access, and now it's Lyft Wheelchair. So they recently changed their name. So that is more available. One thing to keep in mind with all of these services and these ride shares is they have limited hours. So it may be 8 a.m. to midnight. So if you're going out late night, you might want to make sure that it's available at the time that you need to be picked up, because you can run into a situation with it. So it's just kind of making yourself aware of that. And then also just making sure that, like advocating for yourself and making it really clear about what you need. There are a lot of taxi companies. The one thing I do like about taxi companies compared to some of the ride shares is you can actually make a reservation ahead of time. So you can order a wheelchair accessible vehicle and it will be there at that time. And that's what I found better about cab services. And also when you're traveling for some of these different sites or locations, you can Google what's available in the market, and you can rent accessible vehicles. You can rent a Wave. And also there are other companies that are non-emergency medical where if you needed a Wave, they have them available that you can reserve them to. So.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I mean,
thank you. No, that was wonderful. All right. Before we do our lightning round, where everyone's going to give us their number one tip, I want to recognize Kellen. She helped get all of this together and put us together and helped with formulating the question and stuff. So thank you, Kellen. All right. I'm going to start at the end. Daniel, what's your number one advice to everybody?
Sure. I think I already gave a lot of tips and tricks, so hopefully you took those notes down. I would say my advice is, I think a lot of times we as disabled people are told that we need to be grateful and thankful for like the charity that people are giving to us. But these things are required in the law, and disabled people in our country and around the world fought and occupied spaces and put their lives on the line to give us these rights. And so I think that helps shift the mindset. Like, existing in public while being disabled is a form of advocacy. And so don't ever feel like you are an annoyance because you need this type of seat or this type of room. Like, you have the right to be at a national park or in a hotel or wherever you want to be, whether that's for medical travel or just tourism. So I think take that you have these rights. There's something really prideful about having a disability and still having access to these spaces. So don't feel like you're a bother or an annoyance. These are rights that people fought to make sure that we all have. And
thank you, Daniel. All right, Tyler.
So I would say number one is make sure that you continue to put your thoughts and your experiences out there, understanding that there are design firms and there are airlines and other people within the entire travel journey who would be willing to provide something if they were aware that it was something they needed to provide. Not saying that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes you don't have what you need, but the longer you say so, the more you put your thoughts out to the industries, the more people will respond to that and make your overall journey as good as it can be.
Wonderful. Thank you. Terry.
Well, I think it's being really clear about what your needs are. And, it's like with planning trips, you put a lot of thought into where you want to go and what you want. And then it's also putting into thought about as much planning as you can into what your needs are and seeing if that's, what's available in that area and what's available to you, and make sure that you can get it reserved as early as possible. And never be afraid to ask for something that you may or may not think, would be accessible. But like a Hoyer lift, you can rent those and have them delivered to your hotel room. And that's one of the things that, if somebody hadn't asked for it, we wouldn't have thought to do it. So always ask for what you need. You may get a no, or it's not available, or you might get a, let me look into it, and be surprised by what comes out of it. So always ask for what you need.
Thank you, Terry. Megan.
I would say be creative. Like I found a whole lot of products for the bathroom on Amazon. There's like waterless shampoo, dry shampoo, bath wipes, all that stuff. Like that's just for the bathroom. And like you can grab a pincher if you need something that's far away or up high. Maybe just like you have to show other people how difficult it is. Like, that's really not accessible. And they're like, I think it is. And you're like, okay. And then maybe yeet yourself onto a bed. I don't know. You might have to do that. Might
All right.
get the message across. Hopefully you will. Hopefully you don't get hurt.
Yeah. All right. Be creative. Thank you, Megan. And Sean, last word here.
I love that Daniel said, in the moment, it may not feel good to get a response of X, Y, or Z, but having those encounters and talking about them and putting them out there is what helps make new processes and regulations a thing. So my final tip is don't be afraid to travel. Get creative. Think about it, plan ahead if you have to, but don't let the challenges you're up against keep you from enjoying life and enjoying the rights that we have access to. So get whatever that is, whether it's RV, Uber, on your trike, plane, live your life.
I like it. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. We want to get everyone to lunch. I don't know if we have time for any questions. I think we might move on, but before we go to lunch, I'd like to invite Jen up. We have a couple of things to say real quick. Oh, a mic.
You can have mine.
All right. So thank you all so much for a great panel discussion. Just a quick story. My first time meeting Terry was a few years ago on the phone. There was a clinical trial ongoing. It was happening over the Thanksgiving holiday. And I contacted the study sponsor and said, FARA would love to do something for the folks who are going to be away from home for Thanksgiving. What could we possibly do? Could we host a lunch or a dinner or anything? Like, what could we do? And they were like, yeah, sure. And I said, well, how are we going to arrange for transportation on Thanksgiving? And Terry totally figured it out. They put me in contact with Terry. She said, what do you want to do? I said, ideally, I'd love to have all these folks come to the FARA office on Thanksgiving Day and host a Thanksgiving lunch with them. And she found all the drivers, all the accessible vehicles who are willing to give up their time on their holiday to do this for us. And she was happy to do it and excited about it. And we were back and forth all day. Like, did everybody get there? Is everything okay? And just, Terry, thank you, because I know you put in countless hours to make those things happen, and you made it easy for us. And it was, you know, she said, what do you need? What do you want? And she made it happen. So amazing. So we just want to take a few minutes before you go to lunch to acknowledge members of our community that had given significant time and expertise in service to the FA community and the FARA mission. And our first recognition award is the Ron Bartek Acting Together Award. This is presented to someone who exemplifies the spirit of service and collaboration. Many of you know Marilyn Downing, but for those of you who don't, I'd like to take a minute to introduce you to her. Marilyn was the founding secretary of the FARA Board of Directors back in 1998 and served for an incredible 25 years before stepping down this past year. In the years when FARA was all volunteer, Marilyn was a one-woman show acknowledging all the gifts and running a fundraising department out of her kitchen. She deposited all the checks, she handwrote all the thank you notes, and she collaborated with every family doing grassroots fundraising to help support them in making their events successful. My earliest memory was in Marilyn's kitchen, and she and her husband, Terry, who is FARA's founding treasurer, were transferring all the records and the books over to Felicia and I. And it was one of those moments where you could tell they were like, oh, thank goodness there's help, but should we really trust you? Because this is really important and you can't screw this up. Marilyn served on behalf of her daughter, Bridget, but really she got to know many of you, and she served the whole FA community. We don't have enough time for me to share all the ways Marilyn has advanced FARA's mission to treat and cure FA. She has been at all of our scientific conferences. She has taken minutes for countless executive and board meetings. She has volunteered at many events, hosted her own events, and those are just a few of the many contributions she and her family have made. The most remarkable thing about Marilyn and the founding board of FARA was the courage to set a path where none existed. And our journey is so much better because of it. And this year's Acting Together Award is presented to Marilyn Downing. Marilyn couldn't be here, unfortunately, but she was hopefully listening and got to hear all of that. And I'm looking forward to delivering that award to her in person. And one last note on Marilyn, if you're ever in need of someone to host an impromptu hotel dance party, she's your gal. Don't ask me why I know that. Kyle?
Love it. I got a mic here. And that presentation comes with a few tears of appreciation. I was crying those tears partly for Ron because he wasn't up here in front. So. Thank you, Marilyn. So our next award is the Community Impact Award, which is given to a group who has made a significant impact on the strength of the community and FARA's mission. You may remember a few years ago, we recognized founding members of the Ambassador Leadership Team. As those founding members stepped out of their leadership roles, there was a need to fill those roles with new people to take on this important work. And these emerging leaders were up for the challenge. We'd like to acknowledge Madeline Friedreich Rainsford, Andrea Keats, Matthew LaFleur, Brittany Summerfield, and Chandra Trantham with this year's Community Impact Awards. All have contributed by investing time and leadership in the Ambassador Program, which now has over 80 team members. They've also, they've also led specific project teams. For example, Madeline has helped lead teen hangout sessions. Andrea and Brittany co-led weekly Meet the Community interviews and blog posts. Matt leads the speaking team, and Chandra has led the social media team and invested countless hours on FARA's communications team. They strengthen the community. Thank you, Todd. This is ridiculous, but I love these folks. They strengthen the community through storytelling, both by sharing their own voice and shining a light on their peers. They also stay educated on research and other FARA activities so as to be a resource for others in the community. We're grateful for their leadership and service. We invite Brittany, Matt, and Chandra to come forward to receive their awards and be recognized. And we'll present Andrea and Madeline with their awards next month at Ataxia Dallas. So come on out, you guys. Thank you.